Ideas that were never used. I don't know, there was one in Alaska, there was one at Lake Louise in Banff, and it's starting in New York somehow, and it's moving in a northwesterly direction, which was my original title, in a northwesterly direction, and it's going to wind up in Alaska, and on the way it's going to stop in Mount Rushmore. Who and what? I used to make lists of possible protagonists. One of them was a Madison Avenue advertising executive. The other was a sports announcer. The other was a Frank Sinatra type entertainer. It was all kind of mechanical. And eventually there came a day where he and I knew a little bit of the story. A little bit, maybe up to Grand Central Station or something like that. And he said, well, don't you think it's time you tell MGM? And I said, I tell MGM? I'm not going to tell MGM. He said, you mean I'm going to have to do your work for you? And I said, absolutely. So he gathered the MGM executives together and BS'd them a little bit and used whatever he knew that we had discussed and made them feel that Ernie and I have decided it would take too long right now to do the Wreck of the Mary Dear, so we're going to do this one instead. And they were thrilled. They didn't know that we didn't know what the hell we were doing. I didn't know what the hell we were doing. And they didn't know it. And they used to salute me in the corridors. Kenneth McKenna used to say, how's it going, Skipper? He thought it was the Wreck of the Mary Dear. Incidentally, they made the Wreck of the Mary Dear. What a disaster. Gary Cooper and Charlton Heston. It was a calamity.
Where did the idea of him being a non-existent person, where did that come from?
I'll tell you exactly where that came from. One day during our conversation, pretty early on, Hitch said to me, are we on here? Hitch said to me, you know, I met Otis Guernsey at a cocktail party in New York. Otis Guernsey wrote for the movie section of, I think, the Herald Tribune, as it was then called. And he said he had once heard that the CIA had created a non-existent decoy for some reason or other, and that Hitch should feel free to use it if he wanted. I said, hey, I can use that. Well, I was a little mortified when the picture was over. I noticed they had to sign a letter with Otis Guernsey and pay him $1,000, I think, just so that he wouldn't make any claims on the picture. And I hadn't known about that at all. Anyway, as we were moving along, Hitch was, I then had to go to Paramount to meet with him, to talk, and then he left me to make Vertigo. And I checked in at MGM, and it was a very lonesome time. I was all alone at MGM, trying to write what comes next, trying to quit the picture constantly because I hated to get out of bed in the morning and face that typewriter because I didn't know what came next. And sometimes there would be a day when I wrote only a page. Sometimes there'd be a day where I wrote nothing. And my agent refused to let me quit because he said, you already quit the Wreck of the Mary Dear. You can't quit. And I just kept going, and finally I got 65 pages of a first draft. And Hitch was vacationing in Jamaica, British West Indies. And I have in my scrapbook the 4-page handwritten letter he wrote to me on receiving the first 65 pages. He was thrilled. Lou Wasserman was thrilled. Lou Wasserman was there, by the way, vacationing. So was Senator John F. Kennedy and his wife, and Oscar Hammerstein and his wife. Hitch gave me the guest list. And that would...
Oh, I'm sorry. At that point, 65 pages
yes.
in, did you know where it was going?
No, I knew I had to get to Mount Rushmore eventually, but I was nowhere near Mount Rushmore. There came a time when Hitch finally checked in at MGM at the other end of the building. And I was in my little office, number 262, where I had written Executive Suite years before. And not years, it was 4 or 5 or 6 years, I forget. And Hitch started casting the picture. Cary Grant had been calling constantly, you know, and Jimmy Stewart had been calling Hitch constantly. And I told Hitch that if Jimmy Stewart played that role, the picture would be 6 hours long, you know. I said, only Cary Grant can really deliver all that dialogue. There's a lot of exposition that went in the picture, and Cary later complained to me bitterly that he had to carry the whole story. So, Hitch checks in at MGM. I'm pushing along very slowly. Suddenly, Cary Grant goes on salary, and I realize I haven't the faintest idea why they're going to Mount Rushmore, or what they're going to do when they get there, or what the whole last act of the picture is. And I sat for 2 weeks without being able to write a single word, knowing that disaster was approaching real fast. So I called Hitch and I said, Hitch, we're in trouble. He said, I'll be right down. He left his office. He didn't want to be in trouble in his office. He came down to my office, and I told him, it's disaster. I haven't the faintest idea. It's been 2 weeks now. I haven't been able to write a page. And he said, well, here's what I think we should do. We should get one of those famous mystery novelists, one of those novelists who write thrillers, and we'll have him or her sit in and throw ideas out. And I said, well, God, what'll they say upstairs? I mean, I'm supposed to be writing this picture. He said, I'll tell them it's my fault that I wasn't able to be enough help to you, something like that. So now it got to be 6:30 at night. We had to go down to his office, and we sat there, and all he was talking about was which novelist we should hire. And I was listening to every word he said, and suddenly I said, she takes a gun out of her purse and she shoots him. Fake bullets, to show that she's really not one of our people, but them, because she's shown a little disloyalty by having Thornhill up in her hotel room, etc. And I said, well, these are fake bullets. And immediately there fell into place the entire last act. I said, you know, forget about the novelist. I know exactly what to do, and because there was a whole situation there.
Where did the airplane scene come from?
It came from a conversation that Hitch and I were having at his house when I said, I want him to be sent out to his death. And Hitch said, I know what. He's all by himself, and a cyclone or a tornado comes along. I said, Hitch, how are they going to get a tornado to come along? And there we were up in the sky, and somehow the tornado became a plane, and then a crop duster plane, and we acted out the entire sequence right in his house. Acted it out shot for shot, and then I quickly went home and wrote it down, shot for shot. the whole goddamn sequence. And that became the shot seen around the world. It was in context. I needed some way in which they're going to try to kill him. Even as I see it now, you know, as famous as it is, I realize, geez, if they wanted it to look like an accident, why do they shoot bullets at him, you know? Their first attempt is to kill him with a plane. You know, they swoop down and try to kill him with a plane on the first pass, and he falls down. But then later, when they use bullets, even today, I realize that doesn't make sense. They could have shot him in Chicago.
How did you put together the actual Mount Rushmore sequence?
How did I put them together? Just the way they were shot, really. I'm still stunned at the work that the art director, Robert Boyle, did in creating Mount Rushmore, because once the Bureau of National Parks heard, possibly thanks to what you put in the Herald, heard that I was planning, or Hitch was planning, to have people kill each other on the faces of Mount Rushmore, they refused to let him shoot in Mount Rushmore National Park. So he got one long shot of the faces. All the rest of it was created in Culver City, in sound stages. I might add that the reason I did it so meticulously in the screenplay was that I first took a trip to Mount Rushmore, hired a forest ranger on his day off, and decided I was going to climb Mount Rushmore and get to the top to see what we could stage up there at the top. And halfway up the faces of Mount Rushmore, I looked down and realized that if I made one slip, I'd be killed. So I said, the hell with this, I'm a screenwriter. So I immediately went down, bought a Polaroid camera, and gave it to the forest ranger and said, you go up there tomorrow and shoot 360 degrees around the top of this monument. He did, and it turned out there was nothing up there. There was no place to have a scene. The faces just drop off precipitously. So it all had to be created at Culver City. But that's how I knew where I wanted things to happen. I was right there on the faces myself, which is more than Eva Marie Saint can say, or Cary Grant could say, or Marty Landau could say.
Now, the last scene of that movie,
Yes.
which I guess 45 seconds long, something in that
Well,
nature.
not the last scene, but Bill Goldman timed the amount of time it took for the picture to conclude, starting with the shot that rings out and Marty Landau's body starts falling. 45 seconds. Bill Goldman told me that. I said, I can't believe that. And he said, well, you go look at it and time it. I remember feeling, my God, if I try to explain all this, I will be opening so many cans of peas that I will never, ever get them closed. So I decided to do it with like one line of dialogue, no fair, not very sporting, using real bullets, or whatever the line was. Or thank you, Sergeant. And there's Leo G. Carroll, the professor. It's like, don't ask me how he knew exactly who to get and where they would be and all that. It was like, and get Eva Marie up into that compartment for the happy clinch at the end, and try as hard as you can to make it look as though she's being lifted off the cliff, and over and out. And it took 45 seconds. But you're right, it would have taken, God, I never could have done it.
Which of the directors were the most help to you as a writer?
I really would not single out any one person. I really wouldn't. I have to say Robert Wise. I have to say Alfred Hitchcock. I have to say Billy Wilder. I certainly have to say Sandy McKendrick. Each director in a different way, each producer in a different way, if there were one. I can never feel that I did it alone like some directors can feel, or like most movie critics feel. The director did it. I think by and large, the screenwriter did it with the help of director, producer, cinematographer, composer, film editor.
Where did the opening of West Side Story come from?
Well, I hadn't written a screenplay yet. The two of us, Bob Wise and I, met in New York, and we cruised all over New York like idiots, meeting with gangs, meeting with social workers, meeting with the police, seeing the show in Chicago. I think Bob turned to me one day and said, "Ernie, we're not exactly starting with nothing, but we did a lot of research." And then, of course, Jerry Robbins came on as co-director as well as choreographer. And there was a lot of talk as to how we open this up. We have to open this up. They worked on the stage, and very fortunately, a whole section of New York had been condemned, and United Artists managed to get them to leave the building standing. So that's where Bob Wise and Jerry Robbins shot that whole opening sequence. It was incredible. We all contributed enormously to that picture. Jerry Robbins certainly, Bob Wise certainly, me certainly.
Was the plot of the stage show changed in the movie at all?
I made it more dramatic, more of a drama, and I rearranged the numbers in West Side Story so that they seemed more appropriate. As impressed as I was with that musical on the stage, I'm a little astonished that the numbers were quite often in the wrong place. You don't do G Officer Krupke after the rumble has taken place. They did it on the stage. Maria sings I Feel Pretty after the two bodies are lying on the ground on the stage. I put I Feel Pretty up front. I put G Officer Krupke before the War Council meeting where it belonged. I always felt that I was listened to. As long as I was a screenwriter, it was only when I became a producer that people would get so frightened at everything I said that they couldn't listen. As a screenwriter, I had a lot of authority because they would listen knowing that I couldn't make anything happen if they didn't want it to happen. So it was a power of communication. West Side Story, all I was thinking about was how to make this work as a movie and don't change a damn thing if that damn thing works, even though it was on the stage. Don't go proving yourself by making something different out of it.
Why are there not more writer-producers in the movies?
First of all, I don't think that many producers have all that much control over a picture as you might think they do, or as they did years and years ago. Producers are sort of producers in name only or in credit only. You never know who really had the authority on a picture.
There were 10 of them.
Yeah, usually there are 10 of them. Executive producers, associate producers, a film by, presented by, et cetera, et cetera. You never know. I don't think that all screenwriters want to be directors. I don't think all screenwriters should become directors. I think there's a tremendous skill, craft, talent in being a good director. And I was always astonished that directors didn't feel proud enough of their own work as directors. A lot of them had to sort of claim auteurship, as though it isn't enough just to be the director.
Do you have any closing advice for writers entering the business today? Outside of don't, which was Billy's advice?
Well, my advice to writers entering the business today is, if you have any skill at another form of writing in another medium, I would make sure that that other medium is there for you, because you will not get as much satisfaction from being, quote, only a screenwriter, close quote. It is not really a writer's medium in the eyes of the world, or in the eyes of the film world, or in the eyes of film critics. Therefore, being, quote, only a screenwriter, close quote, is not satisfying enough to a writer, in my opinion.
Ernie, I beg to differ. Sometimes being only a writer is more than enough. Please accept the heartfelt gratitude of a cookie full of arsenic, who knows very well, as the Bible tells us, in the beginning was the Word. Only later came the eraser. When you can create moments like these that live in our memory, no actor, no director, no producer could have done it without your screenplays. And thanks, Ernie, for all of us who go to the movies.